In a moment that would change everything, a young black boy finds himself kneeling beside a teacher who'd spent years belittling him. She'd rolled her eyes at his questions, called him disruptive, and often made him the example of what not to do. But now she lay unconscious on the classroom floor, and he was the only one who knew what to do. What happened next left an entire school stunned, and a nation talking about compassion, courage, and justice in a place least expected. A fifth-grade classroom. Ever had to choose between resentment and doing the right thing? You won't forget this story. Location: Lincoln Elementary School, Room 4, B. Time 10:22 a.m., Tuesday morning. The smell of dry erase markers lingered in the air. Posters of multiplication tables lined the walls, faded slightly at the corners from years of sunlight. Laughter echoed faintly down the hallway, the sound of recess winding down as students trickled back into their classrooms. In room 5B, Mrs. Caldwell's fifth-grade class was deep in quiet work time. Pencils scratched softly across lined paper. Pages turned. A clock ticked steadily above the whiteboard. The only real movement was the flutter of a curtain catching a breeze from the cracked window. At her desk, Mrs. Caldwell sat upright, watching her students with her usual mix of strict focus and silent pride. Known for her high expectations and even higher standards, she commanded respect without ever having to raise her voice. Her reputation echoed through the school. She was stern, but she was fair. Suddenly, her hand gripped the edge of the desk. It was quick, subtle almost. Then she swayed. A few papers fluttered to the ground. Her coffee mug tipped over, spilling lukewarm liquid across a stack of quizzes. A low sound escaped her throat before her knees gave out. She collapsed with a sharp thud. For a few seconds, the room held its breath, then gasps. One girl screamed. Another boy pushed his chair back, eyes wide. Several students froze, uncertain, caught between confusion and fear. In the center of the room sat Terence, 10 years old, quiet, observant, always sitting near the back, always seeming a little outside the circle. He blinked once, then again. Mrs. Caldwell was on the floor. She was the same teacher who once humiliated him in front of the class for missing a question. The same one who gave him detention for being late, even when he had walked his little sister to her classroom first. The same one who, just last week, told him to act like a student who cared. But now, none of that mattered. Terence did not wait for permission. He moved. What would you do if the person who wronged you needed your help? Terence Williams sat in the third row, second seat from the back, in every classroom he had ever been in. It was not assigned, but that was where he always ended up. Quiet enough to be overlooked, close enough to the front to do the work without missing anything. A straight-A student, organized and efficient, but almost always invisible. At home, things were different. He lived with his grandmother, a retired EMT who still woke early and kept a strict morning routine. She had trained him in first aid and CPR by the time he was 7. She treated his learning with the same seriousness as her years on the job. "Pay attention, Terence," she would say. "Every second matters when someone needs you." Each morning, Terence helped his little brother put on socks, shoes, and a too-big backpack. He tied the laces when they came undone. He double-checked lunchboxes and reminded him not to forget his reading log. Then they walked together to the bus stop. His brother would wave as the doors hissed closed. Terence would walk to school alone. He was always polite, always prepared. He never interrupted, never rolled his eyes, never argued. And yet in class, it never seemed to be enough. Mrs. Caldwell often singled him out. Her tone sharpened when she addressed him. "Eyes on your own paper," she once snapped, even though Terence had been staring out the window, daydreaming about outer space. "Stop mumbling," she barked another time, though he had not said a word. Still, he did not speak back. He never corrected her, never explained himself. Instead, he wrote, in a blue notebook that he carried everywhere. He filled it with drawings, lists, poems, and diagrams. It was part diary, part sketchbook, part escape. The notebook was the one place where he felt fully himself. His grandmother saw it and nodded with approval. She did not ask what was in it. She just kept buying new ones when the old ones filled up. He never asked to be seen. But he noticed everything. He noticed who laughed the loudest and who sat alone at lunch. He noticed when someone wore the same shirt 3 days in a row. He noticed when a teacher's smile did not reach their eyes. Even when Mrs. Caldwell embarrassed him or seemed unfair, he observed without bitterness. She was stern, but something about her seemed tired, like she was carrying something that no one else saw. He wrote about that, too. A line scribbled at the bottom of a page. "She is not mean. She is heavy." Terence did not raise his hand often. He never pushed to be first in line. But he was always ready, always alert. In group work, he listened more than he talked. In reading time, he finished books ahead of schedule. He liked to reread them, finding new meanings each time. His favorite stories were not about heroes with superpowers, but about quiet people who chose to act when it mattered. His grandmother often said, "True strength is what you do when no one thanks you for it." That line stayed with him. So when the classroom fell into chaos, when Mrs. Caldwell collapsed and the room froze, Terence did not wait to be called. He just moved. Know a kid like Terence? Quiet strength deserves to be seen. Drop a name in the comments. Mrs. Caldwell had taught at Lincoln Elementary for 18 years. Her classroom was one of silence, structure, and expectations. The desks were arranged in perfect rows, her lesson plans timed to the minute. Nothing was left to chance. She kept a clipboard close and a red pen closer. To students, she seemed made of stone. She rarely smiled. Her greetings were brief, her instructions were sharp. The rules were posted in bold letters at the front of the room. No talking, no excuses, no second chances. Colleagues admired her consistency. Some said she was the kind of teacher who got results. Others whispered that she never really connected with the students. Her hallway conversations were limited. Her classroom door stayed closed. With Terence, she was particularly rigid. He puzzled her, quiet, smart, and always on time. Yet she saw something in him that she could not name. Maybe it was his silence. Maybe it was how he seemed to be listening, even when his eyes were on the window. She often mistook his stillness for indifference. When he corrected her math mistake on the board, she had felt her face burn. Without thinking, she told him to erase it and sit down. There had been a moment of hesitation in the room, a collective pause. She ignored it. She told herself she was protecting her authority. Parents had raised concerns about her. Some accused her of favoritism. Others said she was too harsh. But with her years of service and close relationships with the district staff, those concerns rarely stuck. She had tenure. She had influence. She kept teaching. The truth was, Mrs. Caldwell carried her own weight. A personal life full of quiet losses and disappointments. A son who no longer called. A home that felt more like a waiting room. She never shared that part of herself. She brought only discipline into the classroom, and nothing more. She believed she was doing the right thing. Structure over sentiment. Results over rapport. What she never saw was how her words stayed with some students long after the bell rang. How Terence, for all his silence, absorbed every instruction, every criticism, every look. She never knew he went home and wrote about her in a notebook, not out of anger, but out of curiosity, noting her posture, her tone, her silences. She never imagined he would be the one who would rise to help her when her body gave out. And when her mind drifted in those last moments before she collapsed, she did not think of test scores or neat rows. She thought of her students, the ones she never really saw. Ever had a teacher or boss who misunderstood you? Tell us what changed that. As Mrs. Caldwell hit the floor, the air seemed to vanish from the room. Chairs scraped back, pencils clattered to the ground. A soundless second passed before a scream rang out. "Somebody call 911!" a student shouted, voice cracking, but no one moved. 25 fifth graders, frozen in their seats, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, sat in stunned silence. A few students glanced at one another, searching for direction. Others clutched their desks, unsure what to do. Terence stood. Not quickly, not dramatically. He stood the way someone does when they already know what needs to be done. He remembered his grandmother's voice. Calm, firm, check for breathing first. Look, listen, and feel. He walked to the front of the classroom, ignoring the gasps and whispers around him. He knelt beside Mrs. Caldwell. Her body was still. Her eyes were closed. One arm was curled beneath her. The other stretched limply toward the tipped-over chair. "Mrs. Caldwell, can you hear me?" he asked softly. No response. He placed 2 fingers gently against the side of her neck, checking for a pulse. Then he leaned close to her face. No breath against his cheek. No rise or fall of her chest. Terence took a deep breath. Then he began chest compressions. He placed the heel of his hand at the center of her chest and laced his fingers, just like his grandmother had taught him. He counted silently, pressing down in steady rhythm. A few students began to cry. One girl huddled beneath her desk. A boy near the door finally ran out, shouting for help. Terence kept going. 30 compressions, he muttered to himself. Then check. He paused, tilted Mrs. Caldwell's head gently back, and leaned down again. Still no breath. He resumed compressions. A student near the window, shaking, lifted a phone and began recording. The lens focused on Terence's small hands, the crease of concentration in his brow, the precision of his movement. The footage would be shared thousands of times before the day ended. But Terence was not thinking about cameras. He was thinking about staying steady. He was thinking about the way his grandmother's hands had guided his once small ones through the steps of CPR again and again, using a practice dummy she had brought home after retirement. "This is not pretend," she had said. "One day you might be the only one who can help." The classroom noise faded as footsteps pounded down the hallway. An assistant principal burst through the door with 2 other staff members. One knelt beside Terence. Several fingers pointed at Terence. He only nodded. "Would you remember your training in the heat of panic? What prepared you for it?" The hallway echoed with the sharp footsteps of urgency. Just as Terence counted out his latest set of compressions, the classroom door flew open. The principal entered first, face tense, followed by the school nurse carrying an emergency kit. They dropped to the floor beside Mrs. Caldwell. The nurse gently checked her vitals, while the principal scanned the room, eyes landing on Terence. "You were doing compressions?" he asked. Terence nodded. She was not breathing. "I counted 2 sets." The nurse placed an oxygen mask over Mrs. Caldwell's face and gave a quick thumbs up. "Her pulse is light, but it is there." The classroom was still. Even students who had cried minutes earlier were now holding their breath. A sense of fragile hope filled the air. Moments later, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Red and white lights flashed outside the window. 2 paramedics rushed in, calm but quick. They moved with practiced coordination, asking questions and checking the nurse's notes. One paramedic leaned over to listen for breath sounds, while the other started preparing the stretcher. "She is responding to stimulus," one of them said. "Let's keep her stable. Get her to County General." Before lifting Mrs. Caldwell, the older paramedic turned to the principal. "Who started CPR?" The principal pointed to Terrence. "He did. He acted fast." The paramedic walked over to Terrence. He looked at him with a seriousness that made the room go quiet. "You did good, kid. Real good," he said, clapping a firm hand on his shoulder. Terrence just nodded. He felt the weight of the moment settle into his chest. Not pride, not shock, just something quiet, something solid. The stretcher was rolled out carefully. Students leaned in their seats, watching as their teacher disappeared down the hallway. She was still unconscious, but now she was breathing. After the paramedics left, the principal turned to the class. "Everyone, stay seated. Help is on the way for all of you, too," he said. "You are safe." Then he looked at Terrence again. "You kept a grown woman alive today. That is something no one in this room will ever forget." Terrence returned to his seat slowly. Some of his classmates stared at him. Others simply looked down, unsure of what to say. But Terrence was not looking for applause. He was thinking about the steps, the checklist, the way each part had led to the next. The nurse walked by his desk and paused. "If you ever want to help in the health office, even just to observe, you let me know," she said. He looked up. "Okay." A few minutes later, the bell rang. Not for class, not for lunch. It rang to release the school early. An announcement followed, asking of parents to pick up students as soon as possible. Terrence waited by the front doors until his grandmother arrived. She stepped out of her car and walked quickly toward him. "You all right?" she asked. He nodded. "I remembered everything you taught me." She pulled him into a hug, tight and long. "You saved someone's life, and you stayed calm. That is all I ever hoped you would be ready for." They walked to the car together. Reporters were already outside the school gates. Parents talked in hushed voices. Students pointed. But Terrence kept his head down. He had done what needed to be done. Ever witnessed a kid act with grown-up courage? "Tell us the story." The clip appeared online just after sunset. A shaky video, recorded from the back of the classroom, caught Terrence kneeling beside Mrs. Caldwell. The image was grainy, but his actions were clear, calm, precise, intentional. A fellow student had uploaded it to TikTok. By the time Terrence finished dinner, the video had already spread far beyond the school. Within hours, it had millions of views. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. "This boy is a hero." "Everyone should learn CPR. This kid saved a life." "Shame on that school for how he was treated." Hashtags like Terrence, the hero, and Show Grace in Action began trending. The video moved from TikTok to Instagram, from Instagram to national news feeds. Reaction videos popped up everywhere. Celebrities shared it. Teachers commented with stories of students who had surprised them. Paramedics weighed in with praise. In classrooms the next morning, teachers played the clip as an example of poise under pressure. Schools across the country began conversations about first aid training for students, but the focus remained on Terrence. His name became a symbol for something rare and real. Local news was the first to arrive. They aired the video under the headline, a modern-day parable of grace. The story included interviews with classmates who called him brave, quiet, and focused. One student said, "He just moved. No one told him to. He just knew." By the second day, reporters knocked on Terrence's front door. His grandmother answered, standing tall in her doorway. She wore her old EMT jacket. Her voice was calm but proud. "Yes," she said, "that is my grandson. He remembered everything I taught him. He saved a life because he stayed calm and prepared." Terrence stood behind her, unsure what to say. He had not asked for attention. He did not want to be on television. But seeing his grandmother speak with such pride made him stand a little taller. That night, a segment aired across national networks. Footage of Terrence performing CPR ran alongside photos of him helping his little brother tie his shoes. A narrator described him as 10 years old, trained by love, led by courage. Requests poured in for interviews. Invitations came from talk shows, educational programs, and even a few university medical centers. His school set up a media liaison to help manage the flow. But through it all, Terrence kept to his routine. He still walked his brother to the bus. He still did his homework. He still wrote in his notebook, though now many of the pages were filled with headlines clipped from newspapers. The classroom where it happened remained quiet. Mrs. Caldwell was recovering, still in the hospital, but stable. Word spread that she had asked to see the footage, that she had wept when she watched it. She sent a letter to Terrence, handwritten and short. "I was wrong about you. You saw me when I did not see you." "Thank you." Terrence folded the letter and placed it inside his notebook. He did not show anyone, but he read it twice before bed. The school community rallied around him. Students painted a mural in the hallway, a heart in the center, surrounded by small hands. A banner hung above it with the words, "Courage is quiet until it speaks." More than anything, the story of Terrence began to spark bigger conversations about the power of early training, about kids who carry more strength than they are given credit for, about how sometimes the most invisible student becomes the most unforgettable. Terrence never expected to be a symbol. He just wanted to help. But the truth, caught in one short video, had gone farther than anyone imagined. What's a video that made you cry for the right reasons? Share the link. The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Mrs. Caldwell opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the soft light filtering through the blinds. For a moment, she did not remember why she was there. Then the ache in her chest reminded her. A nurse stood nearby, adjusting an IV. "You had a serious scare," she said gently, "but you are stable now. You have visitors waiting, and there is something here for you." On the bedside table sat a small envelope, neatly folded. Her name was written in careful handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a note from Terrence. It was brief, written in pencil, each letter steady and clear. "I hope you feel better. I am glad I could help." "Terrence." Mrs. Caldwell stared at the words. Tears welled in her eyes. She clutched the note to her chest and closed her eyes again, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper, something breaking open inside her. A week later, she returned to Lincoln Elementary. Her steps were slower than usual, but steady. The hallway looked the same, but her heart did not. She paused outside her classroom door, breathing in. When she entered, the students stood in unison, surprised but respectful. The room went quiet. Desks were in their usual rows. The posters on the wall hung straight. But everything had changed. She walked to the front, placed her bag on her desk, and turned to face the room. Her eyes found Terrence. "Would you come up here, please?" Terrence stood. He looked uncertain, his hands tucked behind his back. He walked to the front of the classroom and stood beside her. She took a breath. "I want to say something in front of everyone," she began. "I did not treat you right. I made assumptions. I overlooked your strengths." She paused, her voice steady but low. "But you treated me like a human being. You helped me without question. You gave me a second chance at life. Thank you." The room remained silent for one long second. Then applause erupted. Some students clapped with open hands, loud and proud. Others smiled, shy but sincere. Terence looked down, his cheeks warm, but he did not step back. He stayed where he was, beside her. Mrs. Caldwell turned to him once more. "I hope you will let me do better. Starting today." He nodded. They returned to their seats. The day continued, but everything was different. At recess, students came up to Terence with high fives. Some offered hugs. One student said, "You changed everything." Terence said little, but he smiled. It was not about being noticed. It was about being understood. That afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell placed the note back into her desk drawer. She would keep it there always, a reminder that one act of courage can undo years of misunderstanding. She taught the rest of the day with a lighter voice. She asked more questions. She smiled more freely. She even let one student sit by the window, just because he asked. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it shaped the future. Terence went home that day and wrote a new page in his notebook. He drew a simple diagram, a heart with two arrows pointing toward each other. He labeled it Understanding. Have you ever had to forgive someone face to face? How did it go? What happened in room 5B did not stay in room 5B. The moment Terence knelt beside his teacher and saved her life began something bigger than any one person could have imagined. It sparked conversations, rewrote policies, and challenged how schools approached more than just safety. The school district responded quickly. At the next board meeting, a new initiative was introduced. They called it Equity Starts with Empathy. The program aimed to train every staff member and faculty leader in identifying and eliminating bias, understanding student experiences, and practicing compassionate response in the classroom. Workshops were scheduled. New guidelines were drafted. For the first time in years, students were invited to join advisory groups that shaped the rules affecting their daily lives. Terence was invited to speak at the very first session. His name was listed on the agenda next to career educators and board directors. He wore a blue button-down shirt and brought his notebook with him. His grandmother sat in the front row. When his turn came, he stood behind the microphone, feet planted firmly. "I didn't help her because she was nice," he said clearly. "I helped her because she was in trouble." The room held still. He continued, "You do not wait to be treated well before you do what is right. That is what my grandmother taught me. If we all looked at each other like people first, not like roles or problems, things could be different." The applause was not loud, but it was lasting. Many in the room wiped their eyes. A teacher from another school stood and said, "That is the bravest truth I have heard in years." After the meeting, a local nonprofit announced a college scholarship fund in Terence's name. The campaign launched online and, within a week, donations poured in from across the country. Small notes came with many of them. For the kid who reminded me what leadership really looks like. The school made a space on their website to track the scholarship total. It passed $50,000 before the end of the month. But the changes were not just outside. Inside Lincoln Elementary, something shifted. Teachers paused more before speaking. They listened longer. Classrooms added moments of reflection to their daily routines. Principals walked the halls more often, not with clipboards, but with questions. And in room 5B, life moved forward. Mrs. Caldwell changed too. She greeted students by name. She asked how they were before diving into a lesson. She kept a small copy of Terence's note in her desk drawer, right beside her lesson plans. At the end of the semester, students nominated their class leaders. There was a quiet buzz in the air when Terence's name appeared on nearly every ballot. On announcement day, the principal entered room 5B with a smile. "Congratulations to your new class president," he said. "Terence Williams." The room erupted in cheers. Terence blinked in surprise, then smiled. He stood and nodded to his classmates. "Thank you," he said. "Let's make this a year where everyone feels seen." That afternoon, he sat on a bench outside the school. His little brother leaned against his shoulder. "Are you going to change everything now?" the younger boy asked. Terence shook his head. "Not everything, just enough." His brother nodded and opened his lunchbox. They shared the last cookie. A ripple of change had begun, not loud, not fast, but real. The kind that starts in a classroom and ends in how people treat each other in the hallway, at home, and beyond. What would you change in your school or community? Let's dream big. Sometimes the greatest lessons are not found on the syllabus. They are not typed in bold on a lesson plan or printed in the back of a textbook. They do not come with worksheets or quizzes. They arrive quietly, unexpectedly, and stay forever. Terence Williams was never the loudest student. He did not raise his hand often. He did not challenge the rules or ask for the spotlight. But when the moment demanded courage, he stepped forward without hesitation. That single act revealed something deeper than knowledge. It revealed character. It showed the quiet strength of someone who had been watching, learning, and preparing all along. Terence did not wear a cape. He wore hand-me-down sneakers and carried quiet dignity in every step. He was not coached by a crowd, but by his grandmother at the kitchen table. He did not wait for applause. He moved because someone was in need. In doing so, he saved more than a life. He saved a classroom from paralysis. He shifted the direction of a school culture. He turned a teacher's guarded heart into something more open, more human. Mrs. Caldwell may never forget the silence before she collapsed, but she will also never forget the boy who broke that silence with action. The story of Terence does not end with a headline or a scholarship or a title. It continues in every student who now walks through the halls believing their quiet strength has power. It continues in teachers who now pause and see their students as whole people, not just test scores or seats in a row. It continues in every life touched by the story of a boy who did not ask to lead, but led anyway. Because of him, a classroom changed, a district listened, a community reflected, and a teacher, once known for rules and routine, learned something new. Maybe, just maybe, Terence saved her from herself. We often look for heroes in uniforms or suits, but sometimes they are seated quietly at the back of the room, notebooks in hand, waiting not to be chosen, but to do what is right. In the end, the real lesson was not in any chapter of the textbook. The real lesson was written in pencil, pressed into lined paper by the steady hand of a boy who knew what to do when it mattered most. Who's the real teacher in your story? Share this moment. Say his name. Terence Williams.